When Elon Musk walked onto the stage at Goldstone University, no one expected what followed. Silence, reckoning, and the kind of truth that can't be ignored. If you've ever wondered what happens when hard facts collide with comfortable lies, stay with us. This story will challenge you, move you, and leave you asking, how did we let it get this far? The lights were hot, the air charged. Cameras rolled as Elon Musk adjusted the microphone on his lapel, the click echoing through the old stone auditorium. Every seat in Abbott Hall was filled. Students in hoodies and dyed hair sat shoulder to shoulder with professors in tweed, journalists tapping notes into tablets, and university donors with arms folded, ready to be entertained. On the far end of the stage, Professor Dylan Shaw, Goldstone's star intellectual and host of the Goldstone Forum, stood with a smirk painted across his face. His opening jab had landed just moments earlier. Let's see if America's richest man can also count to 10 without tweeting it. But Elon didn't take the bait. He leaned forward, his voice low and steady, not the voice of a showman, but of a man with something heavier than opinion. I want you to remember a number, he said. 30,000. The room stilled. 30,000 children, missing, gone, not lost in theory, not exaggerated for drama, vanished in the hands of traffickers, all tied to loopholes in a system we've pretended is just. Overwhelmed. And if you think I'm making that up, you're part of the problem. This silence was brutal. He didn't blink. That's just the children we tracked. Homeland Security doesn't know where they are, court notices never delivered, IDs never verified, work permits issued like coupons. The average wait time for a hearing? 6 years. 6 years where anyone can disappear into a life no one checks. What I've found isn't a policy flaw, it's not red tape, it's a funnel, and our country is feeding it. Murmurs rippled. The cameraman adjusted. Dylan Shaw shifted in his chair, clearly blindsided. This wasn't the beginning he expected. I've seen the files, Elon continued. ICE agents showed me the logs. I've sat in border stations and heard the stories. I met a 10-year-old girl who couldn't speak, not because of fear, because she didn't understand what had happened to her. She was used to complete a fake family claim at the border, then hand it off like inventory. A gasp came from somewhere in the second row. This isn't about left or right. It's not about who you voted for. It's about whether we still care what happens to the most vulnerable once they cross our line of sight. Do we? Dylan tried to speak, but Elon cut him off with a glance. You want to talk Social Security? Let's start with the 2.1 million non-citizens issued SSNs just last year. Let's talk about 20 million deceased, still listed as active. You think it's a glitch? It's not. It's a gateway. By now, the auditorium wasn't just quiet, it was frozen. And if you still think this is just politics, Elon said, standing taller, then you haven't been paying attention. Fade to silence. Just days before the silence fell in Abbott Hall, the invitation itself was the scandal. Elon Musk, the lightning rod of tech and politics, had agreed to speak at Goldstone University, a campus long regarded as a citadel of progressive thought. To many, it felt like inviting a wildfire into a library. Student unions called emergency meetings. Faculty circulated internal memos warning of platforming disinformation. But Dylan Shaw, the university's celebrated professor of media ethics and host of the famed Goldstone Forum, welcomed the controversy. Let him come, he told the campus paper. Truth doesn't need a safe space. And I've never lost a debate. The media seized on it instantly. Elon Musk facing off with the academic world's sharpest tongue. It was billed as a cultural clash, the intellectual elite versus the billionaire disruptor. Dylan had made a name dismantling senators and CEOs alike with razor wit and data jabs. Elon, they assumed, was just another headline waiting to be torn apart. But what no one saw coming, what not even Dylan saw, was that Elon wasn't coming to spar, he was coming to say what no one else would. From the moment he arrived, Elon refused the usual pre-show dance. No green room, no tech rehearsal, no PR brief, just a quiet walk across campus with his assistant Sarah, both ignoring the protest chants echoing off the chapel walls. When she asked if he was ready, he didn't answer right away. Then finally, They think I'm here to argue. I'm not. I'm here so they can hear it from someone who's seen it. Inside Abbott Hall, anticipation buzzed like static. Dylan greeted the crowd with a smirk and a shot at Elon's Twitter habits, triggering a wave of laughter. It felt familiar. Safe. For one brief moment, the room belonged to Dylan. But that moment died the second Elon spoke. There was no banter, no charm offensive, just numbers, stories, and a voice carved in truth, the kind that doesn't rise, it sinks, the kind that doesn't ask to be believed, only heard. And in that moment, everyone finally understood this wasn't going to be a debate, it was going to be a reckoning. Professor Dylan Shaw leaned back in his chair, one leg crossed over the other, his fingers laced casually over his knee. He tilted his head, wearing the expression of a man already 2 steps ahead. "So," he said with a smile sharpened by years of televised takedowns, "we've heard the headlines. 30,000 missing kids, millions of phantom names in the system, voter fraud wrapped in federal paperwork. But tell me, Mr. Musk, are we talking truth or just a really creative way to sell fear?" The audience laughed, nervous, smug, eager to hear their champion win. Elon didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. "We're talking about data," he said simply, "not fear. Fear comes from ignorance. I'm here to replace that with numbers." He tapped a button on the screen behind them. It flickered to life with a chart, a red spike cutting through a sea of gray. 20 million deceased individuals still active in the Social Security database. Not theoretical, verified. Names, numbers, payments. Many collected, some used to open accounts, access benefits, or worse, justify additional funding models. There was a brief silence before Dylan chuckled. "So, the zombie apocalypse is upon us. Got it." Another round of laughter. Elon let it pass. He clicked again. 2.1 million Social Security numbers issued to non-citizens in the last fiscal year. No in-person interviews, no ID verification, just paperwork and a mailing address. Many of them are still in the asylum system. Some never even showed up to court. This time, the laughter faltered. Dylan leaned forward, eyebrows raised. "Are you suggesting our government is deliberately inflating the rolls to, import voters?" "I'm saying the system has become a tool," Elon replied evenly. "You don't have to rig elections if you can rig the demographics. You don't need a conspiracy if the process is sloppy enough to allow fraud in plain sight." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Elon continued, pulling up another slide. Medicaid enrollment data. Of the 5.5 million non-citizens now in the system, over 1.3 million are receiving benefits. That's not an oversight. That's a feature. Dylan tried to pivot, his voice carrying a sarcastic edge. "Sounds more like you walked out of a closed-door Trump rally, not a field study. Do you have anything that hasn't been floating around in alt-news echo chambers?" Elon turned to him, calm, precise. "I walked out of ice field stations, not rallies. I've sat across from agents who held case files, not headlines. Files. I didn't come here with politics, Dylan. I came here with receipt." For the first time, Dylan's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The numbers hung in the air like smoke, too heavy to ignore, too uncomfortable to accept. But Dylan Shaw wasn't ready to surrender the room just yet. He stood, circling his chair like a seasoned showman reclaiming his stage. "So, let me get this straight," he said, sweeping an arm toward the projection behind Elon. "You're telling this audience, this nation, that the Social Security system has become a backdoor for voter manipulation and illegal benefits, all because a few bureaucrats didn't double-check the mail?" A ripple of laughter broke through the tension. It was thin, forced, but enough. Dylan seized it. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the problem with billionaires trying to play prophet. They mix data with doom and serve it like gospel. Elon wants you to believe that our democracy is being sold off in envelopes, that the system is broken not because it's overwhelmed but because it's rigged. Convenient, isn't it? Makes for a good tweet." The crowd chuckled louder this time. Familiar rhythm restored. A few students clapped. One shouted, "Say it again, Professor!" Dylan smiled, encouraged. Elon didn't move. His posture was still, almost unnervingly so. He let the applause roll, let Dylan enjoy the echo chamber. Then, when the noise began to die, he spoke. Not to the professor, but to the audience. "I get it," he said quietly. "This is easier to laugh at. Because if it's funny, it's not your responsibility. You can dismiss it, mock it, turn it into a meme and forget it by morning." He paused, eyes scanning the crowd. "But what if I'm right? What if that letter in the mailbox meant for someone who died a decade ago is being used right now to access benefits meant for your neighbor or your children? What if the kid who never showed up to their court date is now collecting a paycheck under a false identity? What if these aren't one-offs but patterns?" A young man in the front row stopped mid-smirk. Dylan interjected quickly, his voice more clipped now. "You're turning paperwork errors into a dystopia. You're peddling panic." Elon looked at him, his voice low and level. "I'm not peddling anything. I'm revealing what you've chosen not to see." The laughter didn't return this time. Even Dylan noticed the shift. The crowd was still curious, skeptical, but no longer mocking. Something had changed, and Elon knew it. He didn't need their applause. He had their attention. Elon stepped toward the center of the stage, not pacing, not posturing, just closing the space between himself and the audience, now leaning forward in their seats. "Let me walk you through how the game works," he said, voice steady, low, precise. "Not the theory, the process. I've seen it myself." He tapped again on the controller. The screen changed to a step-by-step breakdown, a flowchart, clinical and horrifying in its simplicity. An individual crosses the southern border, let's say through Eagle Pass or Yuma. No ID, just a story. They say they're afraid to return home. They're processed, then released into the interior with a notice to appear court date set, on average 6 years from now. That's not oversight. That's design. Because 6 years means no follow-up. No show, no problem. He pointed to the next box on the slide. They then file Form I-765, an application for a work permit. It gets approved, and with that comes Form I-766, their employment authorization document. From there, they're eligible to apply for a social security number. A pause. "And it's issued." Gasps fluttered through the room. Some sharp, some faint, but Elon pressed on. No interview, no biometric verification, just the right form, the right boxes checked, and a mailing address. Sometimes a fake one. Sometimes an address that belongs to 10 others doing the same thing, and here's the punchline: Social Security mails it. He let that land. Then they can access benefits, open accounts, register for services. In many states that means registering to vote, either automatically or through loosely verified processes. That's how the system works. It's not broken, it's wide open. Dylan scoffed, his voice trying to find the rhythm he'd lost. "You make it sound like they're all frauds. You're demonizing people who just want a better life." "I'm not demonizing anyone," Elon said firmly. "I'm exposing how the system uses good intentions to mask bad mechanics. You want to help people? Fix the process. But don't pretend giving someone a social security number without verifying who they are is compassion." He shifted slides again. In 2024 alone, 2.1 million social security numbers were issued to non-citizens. Not conjecture. Data from the SSA itself. Over 1.3 million of those are now receiving Medicaid. Not emergency services. Full access. We sampled these numbers and traced cases that linked to multiple benefit claims. Addresses tied to dead people. Cases where no ID was ever produced. And it gets worse. The room was dead quiet. We found examples of people registered in more than one state. We found child tax credits claimed by people who hadn't even entered a courtroom. All of it legal, on paper, but all of it possible because no one checks. Dylan leaned in. "And what's your conclusion, Elon? That the government's conspiring to flood the rolls with illegal voters?" Elon shook his head. "No. I'm saying it doesn't need to be a conspiracy when the loopholes are this wide. This isn't a secret cabal, this is neglect at scale. It's a shell game, and the cost isn't just financial, it's institutional trust. And that, more than the numbers, was what made the silence in the room feel heavy. Because for the first time, it wasn't just Elon exposing a system. It was the audience realizing they'd been living inside it. Elon stood still as the final slide behind him faded to black. No more numbers, no more graphs. Just him, the mic, and a room that had gone from laughter to breathless stillness. "The truth," he said slowly, "isn't what's printed on paper. It's what happens to the people we stop counting." He let that settle, then he said it again, quieter this time. 30,000 children. Gone. A woman in the fourth row visibly stiffened. A professor to Elon's right lowered his eyes. Even Dylan Shaw didn't move. "They weren't lost in the desert," Elon continued. "They didn't vanish into the bureaucracy. They were trafficked. Some across the border, some inside it. Some used to justify asylum claims. Fake families, forged documents, and then discarded when no longer useful. ICE agents showed me the files, the cases, the footage. A little girl in a yellow shirt, maybe 10 years old, carried across the clinging to a man she didn't know. He told border agents she was his niece, claimed asylum. He was released. She was separated after inconsistencies in the story. She didn't speak for 3 days. The room was stone quiet. Elon's voice didn't rise. He wasn't shouting, he was remembering. She had no ID, no birth certificate. No one came for her. They tried placing her in foster care, but she was gone 2 weeks later, disappeared from the system. The agent told me she was likely picked up by the same network that used her. Because they know how to find the gaps, they use them like highways. He looked out over the audience, his gaze sweeping the rows. And that's just one story, one child. Multiply that by 30,000. Dylan finally stirred, but his voice was subdued. "Where's the proof, Elon? Where are the names, the dates? 30,000 is a massive claim." "I asked the same question," Elon replied. "You know what I was told? They can't give me names, because there are no names. These kids weren't documented, they were moved through a pipeline that doesn't require identity, just paperwork, just forms. The same system that sends out social security numbers also lets trafficked children vanish without a single court date ever filed." He paused, his voice tightening with quiet anger. "You think this is about politics, but I've seen the price. A mother in Honduras paid $5,000 to a man who promised to bring her son to America safely. He was 12. His name was Juan. She never heard from him again. She called, she begged. They told her he never arrived. But ICE found fragments of clothing near a stash house outside McAllen, clothes that matched the photo she sent them. They never confirmed. They couldn't. Too much time had passed. Too many boys had come through. No records, just bones." A sob broke out from somewhere in the audience. Elon didn't look away. "Tell me," he said, "is that a glitch in the system, or is that the system?" Dylan tried to respond. He opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. The usual sarcasm, the clever retorts, were gone. He sat still, hands clenched, jaw tight, staring not at Elon but at the floor. The air in Abbott Hall had changed. It was no longer a debate, it was a reckoning. Not just of facts, but of conscience. Elon let the silence stretch. "I'm not here to win an argument," he said finally. "I'm here to ask why no one noticed, why no one asked. Why no one cared that tens of thousands of children, real children, could vanish on American soil under the banner of bureaucracy." He stepped back, and in the audience no one clapped, no one cheered, but many wept. Dylan Shaw sat frozen, elbows on the desk, fingers laced together in front of his mouth as if bracing for impact. The weight of the room had shifted entirely. There was no laughter now, no smirking asides or clever pivots, just silence and eyes. Hundreds of them, no longer looking to him for validation but staring past him toward the man who had dismantled their comfort zone with facts, stories, and an iron calm. Dylan cleared his throat, voice tight, forced. "Look, I'm not denying suffering exists," he said, his tone more cautious than combative. "But you're treating systemic imperfections as if they're calculated crimes. You're painting the government as complicit in trafficking. That's a dangerous leap." Elon didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. The audience felt it. Dylan was flailing. His sentences, once slick and surgical, now sounded like rehearsed disclaimers. Elon finally replied softly, "It's not a leap when you follow the path. I'm not accusing everyone in government of evil. I'm saying the system, as it stands, enables evil. That's worse in some ways, because it means we built it to fail. Dylan leaned back, visibly unsettled, tapping his pen against the desk, something he never did. His polished on-screen persona was wearing thin. "Okay, but what do you expect the system to do?" he asked, gesturing vaguely. "There are floods of people, limited resources, overwhelmed courts. This isn't negligence, it's pressure." "No," Elon replied without hesitation. "Pressure doesn't explain why we don't require ID for a social security number. Pressure doesn't explain why 270,000 minors never got court notices. Pressure doesn't explain why a 10-year-old girl can be handed off twice and still disappear with no one raising a flag." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Every word felt like a verdict. Dylan looked down. He shuffled his papers. He didn't speak. From the third row, someone whispered, "Why didn't we know this?" That whisper traveled like a ripple across a pond, soft but impossible to ignore. Dylan looked up, eyes scanning the audience that once laughed at his jabs. Now they looked through him. For the first time he realized he hadn't lost control of the debate, he had lost the room. Elon adjusted the mic slightly, his voice now softer, not because he lacked conviction, but because he knew the truth no longer needed to be shouted. "This isn't just my research," he began, his tone almost reverent. "I didn't pull this out of spreadsheets and third-party reports. I had help. Quiet help. From the inside." He paused, letting the words linger in the hushed auditorium. "Border agents, caseworkers, clerks from the SSA, whistleblowers, not because they wanted fame, but because they couldn't sleep at night. They've seen what happens behind the curtain. They process the paperwork. They see the same addresses recycled again and again. They watch IDs go unchecked, files go unflagged, court notices returned unopened, and no one stops it. Because the system doesn't punish failure. It promotes volume." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim folder, plain, beige, and worn at the edges. "One woman, a data analyst at DHS, risked everything to send me this." He held it up without opening it. She wrote, "If I lose my job, so be it. But I won't lose my soul." She tracked internal audits never made public. She showed how, in just 3 years, the number of minor asylum seekers without guardians exploded by 74%, yet internal systems showed fewer than half were ever scheduled for a court appearance. Gasps echoed from the back rows. "She tried to raise concerns," Elon continued. "She was told not to ask questions, just process the numbers. She resigned. I flew out and spoke to her myself. I asked why she came to me, of all people. You know what she said?" He looked at the crowd, pausing. She said, "Because you're not afraid to be hated." A long silence followed. These people, Americans, every one of them, aren't political activists. They aren't extremists. They're patriots. They saw something wrong and they tried to stop it, but no one listened. No one wanted to. It's easier to dismiss the numbers than face what they mean. Dylan sat motionless. No rebuttal, no sarcasm, just the quiet breathing of a man beginning to realize the edges of his world were fraying. Elon closed the folder and gently laid it on the table between them. The truth didn't come from headlines, it came from inside, from people who still believe in what this country is supposed to be. He didn't need to say more. The silence said it for him. The debate at Goldstone didn't end with applause. It ended with silence. A silence so heavy it followed every person out of Abbott Hall and into the night like a second shadow. But it didn't stay contained. By morning, the clips were everywhere. A 27-second video of Elon saying 30,000 children gone had already surpassed 10 million views. Another showing Dylan Shaw sitting wordless as Elon described the child named Juan was playing on a loop across social platforms. The hashtags exploded. Goldstone truth. 30K missing. Elon was right. The tone was unlike anything the forum had ever sparked. There was no partisan bickering, no culture war chants, only grief, outrage, and questions. News anchors who had prepared snide commentary the night before pivoted by noon. The Washington Sentinel ran a rare front-page editorial, "When Data Becomes Flesh." Talk radio, especially stations with older audiences, lit up with calls from veterans, grandparents, and retired civil servants. "I've paid into Social Security for 40 years, one caller said through clenched teeth, and you're telling me someone who's not even verified is getting checks while children vanish? This isn't politics. This is betrayal." Dylan didn't return to campus the next day. He issued a brief video from home. Eyes tired, the familiar spark in his voice dimmed. "Last night didn't go how I thought," he admitted. "I assumed I was dealing with spectacle, with someone trying to bend facts for attention. But Elon Musk didn't try to win, he tried to show us something. And maybe I was too proud to see it." The comments flooded in. "Thank you for saying it. We don't need perfect men, we need honest ones." "You listened? That's more than most." Elon, for his part, said nothing publicly, no press tour, no celebratory posts. When asked by his assistant Sarah if he'd seen the trending clips, he simply nodded and said, "It's not about me." At SpaceX headquarters, he returned to work as usual. Design reviews, testing reports, board calls. But something had shifted. Employees spoke more softly around him. A few left notes on his desk. One simply read, "Thank you for seeing what we didn't." Across the country, people weren't just reacting, they were remembering. Remembering every form they signed, every time they assumed someone else was keeping watch. Elon hadn't screamed at them, he'd held up a mirror. And now, the reflection refused to fade. 2 days after the Goldstone Forum aired, Elon Musk stood alone at the edge of a SpaceX launch bay, watching technicians prepare for a satellite deployment. His hands were in his pockets, his eyes fixed, not on the sky, but somewhere far beyond it. The world was still buzzing. News outlets that once scoffed now quoted him with solemnity. Activists and lawmakers called for audits, hearings, investigations. Hashtags still trended. But Elon had said nothing. Not because he didn't care, but because he'd already said everything that needed saying. His assistant Sarah approached slowly, holding her tablet in one hand, her brow furrowed with unread messages. "They want you to do interviews," she said gently. "The big networks, global syndicates, they're calling it a reckoning. Some are saying you broke the dam." Elon didn't look away from the hangar floor. "I didn't break it," he replied. "I just pointed at the cracks." Sarah hesitated. "Dylan Shaw's latest post. He admitted you changed his mind. He said he's never felt more ashamed. And more awake." A slight nod. "Do you think it'll matter?" she asked, voice quiet. "The hearings, the outrage, the tears. Do you think they'll fix it?" Elon turned, finally meeting her gaze. "It's not about fixing everything. It's about seeing it. Really seeing it. You can't change what you refuse to acknowledge." He began walking, not hurried, not triumphant, just forward. And as he moved, Sarah fell in step beside him. In a quiet room on the other side of the country, Dylan Shaw rewatched the debate alone. Not for vanity, not for damage control, but for understanding. The man who once prided himself on always having the final word now found comfort in someone else's silence. He paused on the moment Elon said, "It's not a glitch, it's a gateway." Then he closed the laptop and wrote 3 words in a notebook that hadn't been touched in years. "I was blind." Elsewhere, at town halls, dinner tables, and union meetings, the questions Elon asked began surfacing in places he'd never visit. What kind of country issues benefits to ghosts? What kind of system loses 30,000 children? What kind of citizen looks away once they know? Elon never asked for belief, he asked for awareness. And now, the final word wasn't his, it was everyone else. The story of Elon Musk at Goldstone University is not just a debate, it's a wake-up call. Beneath the facts, the missing children, and the exposed loopholes lies a deeper truth. Systems, no matter how noble in origin, can fail if no one is watching. The real danger isn't just corruption, it's complacency. For too long we've trusted that someone else is paying attention, that someone else is asking the hard questions. But Elon's message was clear: truth doesn't care about comfort, and silence is a choice. He didn't come to win applause or argue ideology. He came to remind us that behind every number is a life, and when the system forgets them, we lose more than statistics. We lose our humanity. It takes courage to confront what we've ignored, to admit the cracks in institutions we once believed were unshakable. But accountability doesn't start in Congress or courtrooms. It starts with each of us, asking, "Why didn't I notice?" The lesson is simple and sobering. Seeing the truth isn't enough. We have to care. And once we care, we have to act. Because if we don't, the next child loss won't just be a number, they'll be the cost of our inaction.